Hey, good morning everyone. I left my mic at home, so I hope the audio is okay. It might be a little more tingy than normal, but I want to, I've had a thought about idea creep that I want to pass on to you. Now, you probably have no idea what idea creep is, and I didn't either before I had this thought, but there is such a thing as scope creep, and let me tie it in. Scope creep, if you're in business, you sign a contract with somebody, it has certain terms, the scope of work is usually a big part of that, and that outlines exactly what's expected, and then there's a price at the bottom. So scope of work is a very important element in a contract for a service provider, and usually what'll happen, I shouldn't say usually, but a lot of times what'll happen is they call it scope creep because it oozes, little by little the client will ask for things outside of the scope, and if you don't go back and check the scope and then reply with, yeah, but it's outside of our terms of agreement, so that would cost a little extra. We want to be nice, and so we just keep saying yes. And pretty soon, scope creep has evolved into this beast where now you've lost control of your client. They're asking for things, they're expecting things. And since you haven't been checking the scope and haven't been telling them yes or no, they just keep expecting different things to happen. Anyways, the situation get way out of hand if you're not careful, and it's called scope creep. It's a big problem. Well, I thought, an even bigger problem, but it's not so tangible, is this idea of idea creep. And this goes back to where, you hear me talk a lot about wisdom with a D-U-M-B, because there's a lot of false thinking out there. There's a lot of stinking thinking where we subscribe to things that people say just because they say them and they're pretty and they're on a t-shirt or a bumper sticker or they're on somebody's Facebook profile, and we're like, oh, that looks like a nice quote in a beautiful scripty font with nice rainbow textured background. I really like that. It must be real and must be true. Therefore, I'm going to subscribe to it. That's a new idea that I'm going to allow into my life. And we don't even really fact check it. There's no Snopes behind ideas. They just ooze out there in the marketplace, and we subscribe to them because they're pretty and beautiful and sparkly and clean and smell nice and soft and shiny and so forth. So I call it idea creep, and this just occurred to me this morning. And a classic example is this idea of multitasking. You've heard me talk about multitasking before, so I'll talk about it again. It's not that it's bad. I see job descriptions or job boards where they're asking for people, and we're like, we need good multitaskers, and blah, 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 blah. Like, multitasking is a good thing. Well, what they're asking for is people that can get stuff done. Not necessarily people that can do multiple things at the same time, especially if they're meaningful things, because if it's meaningful, you can't do a good job on two things at the same time. That's just the way our brains are programmed. If you haven't tried it, I have a challenge for multitasking in a different video, and you should try it. Look it up, try it. It'll prove to you that multitasking doesn't work on any kind of cognitive level. If you are, obviously riding a bus and working, that's considered multitasking, I suppose, and that works fine. If you are reading a book while you're in an airplane traveling, awesome. If you are running, exercising, and listening to a podcast, fantastic. Those are all great examples of multitasking that actually is just fine. And so right there is the scope for multitasking, right? That's the scope of work that works well for that item. But we get this thing called scope creep as it pertains to ideas. And then multitasking, or we start, the barriers that work for multitasking start getting melted down and start oozing into other areas of our lives. So we start applying multitasking. Well, multitasking works great there, it must work great here. And then we sit down to do our most meaningful work, and we can't stay focused, and we start multitasking, and we bounce back and forth between multiple tabs on our computer browser, and we we allow interruptions into our lives by texting and by email and Facebook notifications and all these things that come at us from every different direction. Thinking all the while that multitasking is good, because why not? I ran this morning and I listened to my podcast and I did two things at once, and I was efficient with my time, and doggone it, I feel good about that, right? Well, partially true. It works in some areas and it doesn't work in other areas. The areas it works in are when one of the two items can be brainless and the other item needs your attention, okay? Like running and listening to a podcast. When I run, I always listen to podcasts. I don't listen to music. I used to, but I switched over to podcasts because I get more out of them and it takes my mind away. So I don't have to focus on my running. My running happens automatically. If I were a serious runner and I was really dedicated and maybe I'm training and I have to stay in the game mentally and I've got to count my breathing and I have to monitor my heart rate and my steps and my stride and my this and my that. I had all these things to pay attention to. Maybe I wouldn't listen to a podcast. Maybe that would be my main focus. Or maybe I would listen to soft music so my brain doesn't focus on the music. My brain focuses on the running. Well, in my case, I don't run for all that. I just run because it's good exercise and I enjoy getting out. So my focus gets to go on podcasting. So therefore multitasking can work. As long as one of the two can be brain dead. You don't have to focus on it. You don't have to give any attention. You just run, right? As long as that's the case, you can multitask. I can chew gum and read a book. Well, I don't have to worry about chewing gum. I don't have to focus on it. It just happens naturally. All my focus is on reading the book. So that works. If you put two items together that need your focus or need your attention, you cannot multitask effectively. You will be the jack of all trades, king of nothing. You'll be effective. You'll be lukewarm in all the areas. Have you ever tried to comb your hair and brush your teeth at the same time? I mean, and those aren't even really highly cognitive tasks. If you think about it, those are pretty, but they do require a certain amount of concentration. You've got a rhythm, you're moving your arm back and forth, or you're combing your hair a certain way. And they require just enough attention that if you've ever tried to do both of those at the same time, you might do a mediocre job at both of them, but you're going to mess up on one of them. I tried it the other day, and I'm combing my hair, and all of a sudden my arm starts flailing around like it was the first time I brushed my teeth. And I'm like, oh, okay, teeth. So I'm doing that, and then my hand that's combing my hair starts, just like going really slow and kind of to one side a little bit, just really awkward. And maybe it's just me, but if you can do it, hey, more power to you. When I was a kid, we had this little game. It's called pat your head and, let's see, rub your head and pat your stomach. Or pat your head and rub your stomach. I can't remember. You probably know what I'm talking about. That was always the big challenge. You go around to your friends. Hey, you pat your head and rub your stomach. And it was always hard to do. And I mastered it at one point, so where people could ask me and I could actually do it. But it took some practice. Okay, that is not what we're talking about here, but that is an illustration of two very simple tasks that can be hard to perform together at the same time because your brain can only focus on one thing at a time. So if you're going to multitask, make sure one of the two things can be brain dead stuff. Items that don't require any attention at all. And if that is not the case, then don't multitask it. Make sure you focus, get it done, and then work on the next thing. Okay, so wrapping this all up, back to the idea of idea creep, because that's what this is all about. That was multitasking, which turned out to be, I guess, a significant part of this episode. Multitasking is just an example. This applies in so many areas where we subscribe to these ideas. They work well in one area, and then we say to ourselves, gosh, you know what? Because it works well there, it must work well here. Because that guy has this advice, it must be good advice for me. Even advice, I always tell people, they say, what's the best advice you can give? I say, my answer to that is don't take advice, except with a grain of salt. Some of it could be legit for you, and a lot of it just doesn't apply because the person giving you the advice gives that advice because that advice was good for them. Well, guess what? They have a whole different set of circumstances. They have different training. They grew up differently. They have different assets. Some of them have lots of money. Some of them have large networks of people. Some of them got lucky breaks early in life. Some of them are gifted in different ways or talented in different ways. All things different from you. So why would you think that what worked for them works for you automatically? You shouldn't. Take it with a grain of salt. Therefore, people talk about gut and intuition. That's probably your biggest asset, is follow your gut. And you can bounce things off of people. Certainly, you can get ideas. Mentoring and coaching, invaluable. Absolutely invaluable. At the end of the day, you are the master of your own destiny. And that's the truth. You gotta follow your gut. Idea creep is out there. It's very real. If something comes to you and strikes you in a certain way and you think, wow, that's pretty cool, I want you to red flag that. And I want you to say to yourself, okay, that's cool, but is this shiny objectness going on right now? Am I attracted to it because it's pretty and it looks nice and it's on someone's Facebook wall and there's a beautiful rainbow texture behind it and it's a beautiful script, so therefore I think it must be true? Well, if those are the case, then red flag yourself and say, okay, I'm not gonna do this anymore. I'm gonna take it with a grain of salt. It may or may not be true, and if it is true, great. If it's not, great. But this whole idea of idea creep is everywhere, and then we find out the hard way that it doesn't work. That it's not what applies to one doesn't necessarily apply to the other, and principles apply in certain situations, but don't necessarily apply in every situation, like multitasking. Hope you got something out of that. Make it an awesome day for yourself. Go out and achieve your goals, and if you haven't yet, I'd love for you to join me on my journey of everything that has to do with goal setting, achievement, and all those types of wonderful things. And you can reach me at, I guess, just the easiest place, it's the hub, is 3x5goals.com, 3x5goals.com. From there, of course, my YouTube channel, my Facebook page, you can email me. I've got some products and things on there. Everything is linked there, and you can reach me that way. But anyways, thanks for following, thanks for listening in. I hope these are valuable to you, and have an awesome day.